Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Annah Jamison. Annah's story is super inspiring, and I know she's going to continue to help so many people by sharing it, so I'm just excited to have her on to share a story with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drkaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, also be sure to check out the Shop tab where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Annah Jamison. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Annah Jamison, and Annah is a vegan USA powerlifter and is dedicated to sharing her strength story as well as her diet and lifestyle, just to show how easy it is to be a compassionate athlete who lives a cruelty-free life. And Annah, I'm just so excited to have you. Thank you so much for taking time to come on.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited to be on the show today and really happy to kind of dive in.
Yeah. So, why don't you just kind of walk us all through your backstory, like where you're from and what your health and wellness looked like at a younger age and just how that's all progressed over time to where it is right now.
Yeah, sure. So I am from a suburb right outside of Washington, D.C. called Glendale, Maryland, and real bedroom community. Essentially went to school in DC ever since pre-K and really only went back to Glendale in order to sleep and of course have time with family and things like that. And so growing up, I was actually a competitive cheerleader for a few years. And as I was growing up, I dabbled in a few other sports, but I really, really loved the competitive nature of cheerleading. I think one, because it was female dominated. And at that same time, I was also as I went to fourth grade in a school called National Cathedral School, which is an all-girls school in DC. I really loved the element of being surrounded by a lot of women, especially those who were in sports. And so I think at a young age, I was very aware of what you needed to do to perform at a really high level. And a lot of that had to do with how you were fueling your body. At the same time, though, of course, as you're going kind of through lower school and then middle school, your body is changing a lot. And for me, that was really difficult because I was used to eating a lot coming from a family. My mom cooked almost every single night, or if we were going to practice and things like that, we would eat out. And she was never limiting in terms of, oh, don't eat that or don't eat this. And so at an early age, I think I was encouraged to really fuel my body, especially if it was a day that I was having a game or a competition or anything like that. But actually going into third grade through about fifth grade, I was pretty overweight. And I remember going into the doctor's office and having her pull out one of those little charts and showing me on a graph where I actually sat within kind of a quartile or whatever, in terms of where I should be for weight, and seeing that I was an outlier. So I think in third grade, I was probably around like 5'4", I'm 5'7" now, and weighed about 140 pounds. And so she immediately, my doctor that is, prescribed to my mom to definitely help me watch my weight. And being the type of person that I am, it was really natural for me to already be pretty active, but I became very, I think, obsessive with getting on the right track so that I didn't sit on the outlier part of a chart.
It had to be hard too because you're like at an all-girls school, right? So it's not like I know like it's probably hard at that age because, you know, there's a lot of like judgment and like you're surrounded by all girls. So like that had to have been like amplified just because of that fact alone.
Yeah, definitely. And even for me, so Glendale, where I grew up again, is in Prince George's County, which is a predominantly Black part of Maryland. And I went to a school where I was in the minority. So not only did I not look like everybody else, but I also had a different body shape, and I was kind of straddling these two worlds of being at home and around a culture that was very different than I was growing up in. And so you have the judgment of folks, and especially middle school, everyone's starting to get asked to dances, and because you're at an all-girls school, the boys are coming over. And so it was really, really challenging. And I think for me, I so badly wanted to fit in that I realized, okay, how can I figure out a way to control this situation? And hearing from my doctor, oh, hey, like if you fit within this part of a chart, you will be normal. That was a really easy way, I think, for me to say, okay, well, if I go out and run or if I adopt a certain type of diet, then I ultimately will be able to kind of fit in with everyone else. And being a Black girl, one of maybe 5 or 6 within a predominantly kind of like blonde environment, I so wanted, I think, to be looked upon as attractive. And so I turned to, in a lot of ways, the way that I physically kind of took care of myself in order to do that.
And like, you know, what kind of like diets were you trying? Like, did the doctor give you recommendations, or like, did you just minimize what you were eating and work out more? Like, what did that look for you like that? Because I mean, I'm just thinking, you know, you said 3rd grade?
Yeah. So 3rd grade was when I really became a parent of kind of how large I was compared to other kids. But now actually thinking back on it, the doctor didn't prescribe any type of diet per se. And it was a lot of me actually thumbing through. I can remember like being in the bathroom and stuff, looking through fitness magazines. And I came upon this story of a woman who did 1,000-calorie a day diet, and she was able to lose a lot of weight. And I said, oh, that's perfect. And this was around the same time that, I guess, so going from 3rd grade to 4th grade, I would do that in order to lose weight. Tried it, didn't really work for obvious reasons, but it was something always in the back of my head. And so I tried that diet for a long time, ended up losing weight, of course, eventually by the time 5th grade was over, and going into 6th grade. But it was one of those things where I created a really unhealthy relationship with food. I remember this one day specifically that stands out where I had like 6 diet root beers in order to essentially suppress my hunger. And I remember feeling full and feeling satisfied from the artificial sugar and all of that. But I remember thinking to myself, even maybe if it was subconsciously, that was, of course, unhealthy. But I felt this draw to wanting to be skinny and wanting to look a certain way. And it's ultimately really come to affect, I think, the way that I perceive food and perceive what it means today. At one point, I then tried doing a low carb diet, which also didn't work.
Especially since you're working out so much, you were probably just like dead.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember even just wanting, I think there were times when I would just go to sleep or tell my parents that, you know, I wasn't that hungry, or I would go to sleep around 7 or something like that. So I would miss dinner. And then I think my parents started to catch on because I eventually went back to the doctor. She saw that I had lost a lot of weight. And she asked me, I think very just candidly, how did I do it? And I mentioned that I was just really restricting kind of what I ate, and I was exercising a lot. There were certain times when I would just run. We had a cul-de-sac, and I would put on a hoodie and I would just run and run and run, trying to sweat everything out. And I remember being so proud of myself, which is now the sad thing, because again, I'm very young, 13 or 14 at this age, but I'm so proud of how hard I was working and how little I was eating and how attractive I was going to be when I went back to school. And I ended up getting to a really low weight, maybe around 108 or so was my lowest, or 110. And again, by that time, so I went from 5'4" to 5'7", how tall I am right now. And I weigh 150 pounds now. So you can imagine how skinny and how frail I looked at that size.
Right. Yeah. No, that's crazy. Yeah. I'm just like imagining like somebody at that age, like most people don't like think that way. You know what I mean? Like they don't research enough like that, or they're not out there running. You know, you don't see a lot of third graders out there like jogging with a hoodie on, you know, like, so you
it's crazy.
a little rocky out there, but you know, you take a lot of initiative as, you know, as a young kid, which it tells a lot about your personality, just super motivated, even though, but you just didn't have the right information at the time. Like your intention was right, but then it just led to super, super bad habits.
Exactly. And I think even just a bad relationship with food in general, because then I ended up, I think, really struggling, and still even to this day, sometimes struggle with body image. Powerlifting has definitely helped a lot. And even I essentially joined a gym in DC, and there are a lot of incredibly strong women who are less focused on how they look or what size they are, but instead how strong they are. And I think that has been something that has helped me a lot.
That's awesome. So like, when did it start to kind of click more, or did that kind of cycle of going through different diets and just overworking out, like how long did that go before you started to kind of like make sense of it all?
Sure. So things got better probably once I was in 10th grade or so. They never got great, but I definitely developed a better relationship, I think, with food. And then I went to college in 2011, and I played lacrosse at Amherst College for a few years. And so I was definitely not as focused on kind of working out as hard, just because it was built into what my routine was. Also, being a collegiate athlete, you definitely are encouraged to eat. There's always food around, and there's a lot of alcohol around too. And so we were definitely late night eating pizza and things like that. But even throughout those years, I remember still just having this kind of deep seated feeling of being unsatisfied with how I looked and with how my body was shaped compared to those who were around me. And especially because, I mean, I definitely had boyfriends and stuff throughout the years, but there was always this draw like, hey, I'm not attractive enough. And a way to do that is to change, I think, how I looked externally. And so there was a focus on it. I stopped playing lacrosse after I studied abroad in 2013. And so once I came back from abroad, I stopped playing lacrosse. And that's when I think the cycle came back. And I think for me, it was this sense of trying to gain control of everything that was going on again, because for so long, lacrosse had been a big part of who I was. And not having that anymore, I wanted to still be seen as someone who was like athletic and was able to accomplish things outside of the classroom, even though Amherst, of course, is a good school and all of that. It still just didn't feel like enough. And so that's, I think, when I got back into the cycle of being very meticulous about counting macros, which is something I had never done before. I had counted calories, but that's when I got more into the nutrition side of things and how everything is kind of broken down in terms of macronutrients and all of that.
Right. So like, I mean, you just never really got to address like the root causes of like the internal work. Do you think studying abroad, do you think that helped like with you, like discovering who you were as a person, or like the internal work at all, the mindset? I know you said it when you came back, it kind of cycled back around again, but do you think like that the travel assisted with that at all?
So I definitely think it put a number of things in perspective. When I studied abroad, I actually ended up meeting this Italian guy when I was there. And I spent a lot of time with his family, and seeing how they interacted with food was so much different than I was used to with my family. And it actually, I think, helped me in a number of ways, because food wasn't seen as this thing where you're given huge portions and you're supposed to indulge and indulge. Instead, it was something that was part of entertainment and not the entertainment itself. And I really appreciated that. And it was another thing where we walked everywhere in Rome. And so I actually, for the most part, had a pretty, I think, healthy relationship with food while I was abroad. And a lot of it was stemmed actually from what I learned from his family about what role I think food serves in a social environment. Because in a lot of ways, food became a source of anxiety for me whenever I went out. It became hard because I was like, oh, someone's going to look at how much I'm eating or how little I'm eating. And then it's going to come up as a topic of discussion, X, Y, Z. And that was a source of anxiety. But again, it was nice to be in an environment where food was something that people really loved and that was celebrated, but it wasn't something that was seen as this diet culture that I think we have in the United States, where everything is kind of huge and over the top, or
Right.
you're getting a diet soda with it. So it was a period of, I think, me having a healthier relationship. But again, to your point, I never really addressed what was kind of driving it. And in my family, we never talked about kind of mental health or what it meant to actually potentially have an eating disorder, which I definitely did. And it was something where I did seek help at one point from my family, because my dad ended up finding some journal entry that I wrote where I was like, hey, I need help because this is getting really bad. And they essentially just told me I didn't have a problem. I mean, I love my parents to death, but when you are young, it's hard when you're kind of trying to cry out for help, and then your parents aren't essentially being supportive or kind of being dismissive of you potentially having something wrong with you. So it never got addressed until I started to really do work on myself towards the end of college.
Right. So what kind of what kind of triggered like that want or need, or like, I guess, seeking out the right resources to really go after that towards the end of college? Like what happened? Like what did something specific happen like at the end of college that made that more doable?
Yeah. So I don't think one event per se happened. Towards the end of school, though, my mom did start to get pretty sick. And at first, it was something where she was having a little bit of trouble at work and she wasn't remembering directions and things. And for anyone that knows my mom, she's incredibly outgoing. She is one of the people who's like always on top of things, but I could tell that there were certain things about her memory that just weren't the same as they used to be. And again, she would know everyone in DC, almost to the point that it was annoying. We would go to the grocery store and she'd end up talking to someone for an hour. And I'm like, damn, Mom, like, let's go. But what I started to notice was that her health outside of her physical being was really deteriorating, and I couldn't figure it out. And then some folks at work ended up saying, hey, like, Kim is really struggling with something. What's going on? And so towards the end of school, she ended up, or end of college for me, so 2015, she ended up being diagnosed with early Alzheimer's. And that was just a huge hit to me because I was like, wow, where is this coming from? No one in my family, to my knowledge, had Alzheimer's. And it was something, again, it not only affects, I think, your cognitive ability, but also your personality and things like that.
Right.
And so that was hard for me because I also was psychology and Black studies major at school. And so it was really intimidating to think, okay, like, do I go back home? Do I help my family? What happens? And so my final exams, my senior year, I ended up having just a lot of anxiety around one of my exams, to the point where I was like, oh my God, am I having an anxiety attack? And that had never happened before. And so then I end up seeing a psychologist at Amherst, which is amazing, that they offer that service. And he was good. He said that he didn't think the anxiety was anything out of the ordinary. Of course, graduating college and confronting what your future was going to be is something that I think a lot of people face. But for me, I was also like, wow, my mom is so accomplished. She was the only person of her 6 siblings to go to school or to go to college. And she lost her mom to breast cancer when she was very young, and also lost her dad very tragically, who was shot. And so for me, I was like, wow, so many of the things that I really love about myself are who my mom is, and that's going to change a lot. And so for me, I started saying, okay, what can I do to take parts of my health or become more controlling of that, because in a lot of ways I saw through documentaries and things like that, how certain diseases are often caused by your external environment, of course, but then also certain things that you're eating or certain things that you're ingesting. And so what can I do to be more preventative for my own health and things like that? Because I think it was scary. It was very scary to see that happen to someone who you know her to be one way and she'd always eaten very healthy and things like that. But what else can you do to prevent something like that from happening? Because of course it's nothing that can be cured.
Right. And I mean, yeah, I mean, that's got to be like super scary when it's coming, that comes to home, and like, obviously you don't want to have to go through that. And, when you have kids, like you don't want to have to deal with that as well, like on that opposite spectrum. Right. So, yeah. So, I mean, so like the documentaries, is that kind of like the starting point for you? Like just to learning, kind of like plant those seeds?
Yeah, definitely planted the seeds. I actually, and if she ever listens to this episode, a girl who I went to school with, high school, her name's Jo, and she was vegan all throughout the time that I knew her in high or middle school and high school. And I remember just making so much fun of her. Like I thought her tofurkeys were weird. I thought her going to Chipotle and essentially not ordering anything was weird. And so that was my first introduction to veganism at all.
Is this a public apology to Jo?
Right, it is. So Jo, I'm very sorry.
Sorry, Jo. But we love you though.
Right. But it was one of those things where I was like, okay, whatever, that's super weird. But then I'm kind of a nerd at heart. And so I've always been super interested in documentaries and super intrigued, I think, more so by them than I think TV shows and things like that. And so towards the end of college, I started watching a lot of them, especially about food. Again, I've always had this like fascination and almost obsession with food and how people think about it, of course, from the psychological angle. And I watched Forks Over Knives probably in like March or so of 2015. And I remember thinking, oh my God, yes, I'm going to do this. And did it for a day, was vegan for a day. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, I love pizza. I love my like chicken fingers from Schwemm's, which is this place at Amherst. And then just kind of gave up on it. I was like, okay, whatever. And then revisited veganism the more that I got into kind of the scientific research about it. And the more I started reading peer-reviewed journals on plant-based diets and how beneficial they can be for preventing cancer or for essentially making treatment for some of those chronic diseases much easier, especially since they run in my family. So heart disease, cancers, and now, of course, Alzheimer's. And I started saying, okay, wow, I should actually give this a shot. And so then luckily Amherst had a bunch of vegan options, and that made it a lot easier. And so I would just like walk up to the little like counter at school, and one of the chefs there was super nice, would make me a vegan pizza, and he would make me fresh pancakes in the morning, which was amazing. And so that made it really easy. And I just ever since then haven't looked back. Of course, there have been times when I've accidentally eaten something that I wasn't supposed to, or something that had milk in it and I just didn't read the label close enough. But definitely documentaries were something that got me started. And then actually starting my Instagram has been something great. I remember talking to my friend Carrie and saying, hey, like, I'm going to start a food Instagram and I'm going to start posting my workouts. And I just remember her being super supportive of it. Awesome. And then I slowly started posting stuff. And then when I joined Balance, that's when I was posting stuff even more frequently because I saw how strong the girls were there. And then Allie, who's currently my coach, she wrote on one of my posts essentially saying, hey, like, I'm hosting a district open, which was actually yesterday, the second one. Like, would you want to compete? And I was like, sure, why not? Of course, I was 3 months into lifting seriously at Balance, and the meet was 3 months out then. And so I signed myself up. Awesome. So,
that's really cool. So like, I mean, so you kind of like fell into it by accident, but ended up just really loving it.
Yeah. And I really loved it. And I just found how easy it was. And I was like, wow, this actually makes sense. Like once I started to learn more about the connection between food and disease was when I got super motivated to be like, okay, kind of makes sense for us to not eat certain things, or I used to eat Greek yogurt all the time and it would really jack my stomach up. And to not have that same feeling after eating food was something that was just a welcome to me, because it was definitely something where I would eat like Greek yogurt and everything, and I felt so uncomfortable afterwards. And this is probably too much TMI, but definitely wasn't regular or anything like that. And once I went vegan, that was immediately that became regular. So that was a huge bonus, I think, as well. And the more that it just became habit. And then when I actually moved home, my dad was super receptive to it because he had just been diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And so then my sister at the same time got super into veganism. And it was one of those things where the whole family was kind of on board and super supportive. And even my grandmother, bless her heart, is in her 80s and got me a vegan birthday cake. And so it was one of those things where my family, has always been, I think, super supportive of me doing whatever diet I'm doing that month, but it's something that's stuck. So my dad has been plant-based now probably for about a year and a half or so. My sister has been vegan for a while. My grandmother doesn't eat that much meat. My mom, for the most part, she's much sicker now, but she too has always been super open to it. And so I think that has been really easy for me because it was never something where my family was kind of talking shit or anything like that.
Right.
Even though I get a lot of jokes from my brother, but he's 16, so I excuse everything he says.
Yeah. He won't be there for a little bit, probably.
Right.
No, that's cool. So I mean, you kind of fell into like the lifting part, right? So like, how did that impact you like all around? Because obviously, whenever you make those changes and you start eating that way, like almost everybody I talk to is like, literally it affects your mind, body, spirit. Like it's a whole thing, right? Because it affects your entire lifestyle. So like, how did that affect those aspects for you? And then also when you started lifting, how did all of that kind of work together just to help you overall? Because I know you dealt with a lot of anxiety and a lot of body issues. So like, how has that just overall helped?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing for me has been just an area to actually concentrate some of the physical energy that I have, because I think that's just innate part of my personality. I love being active. And so it's helped me have an outlet that's controlled essentially for that. And I think in terms of body image, it's been amazing because again, a lot of the women that I lift with, they are phenomenally strong. Like I think it's hilarious. And of course, I'm so grateful when people comment on my videos or comment on anything that I post on Instagram, like, hey, you're so strong. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate it. But like, have you seen Allie lift? Or like, have you seen Isha lift? Like, it is just it's a completely different ball game. And to see, I think, women really owning that is awesome, especially in the day and age where femininity is something that is discussed so broadly. It's amazing to see, I think, a lot of women who take it seriously. And the balance or the dynamic at Balance, the gym, is awesome, where you can be female and you can be strong, and it's nothing that's taken lightly by the men in the room. You are very well respected. It's not an environment where you feel sexualized by any means. And you often have guys cheering for you. I remember while I was prepping for my first meet, I was having a particularly rough day, and I had an AMRAP on deadlift or something like that. And some random guy in the gym is cheering for me and getting me through the lift. And it's just that type of community there that I think is really, really special. So I think outside of it actually, meaning powerlifting, giving me a outlet for a lot of the physical energy that I have, it's also been amazing for my confidence, because I'm no longer concentrated as much on what I look like, but it's more channeled towards, hey, like, how can I be as strong as possible? Because ultimately that journey, I think, of progressing is something that is the most satisfying. And I think being given a program and saying, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, you will be successful at the end, and really sticking to something and getting up early in the morning when I don't want to, or when I'm on my period and the last thing I want to do is talk to someone. Getting up and still doing it is something that has been awesome to me, because I think at the end of the day, I'm like not making money from powerlifting. I could not do it and nothing in my life would change really, So it's just really, I think, committing to something and doing it and following through with it that has been awesome, especially when you have people who hold you accountable, like having a coach or having friends who are also kind of on that wheel with you.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, obviously, when you're, that's awesome. Just the fact that it shifts your focus to something positive. But, like when you focus on getting stronger and you're focusing on being the healthiest person you can be, like, and putting the right foods into your body, like the side effect is looking great. So it's like,
yep.
You're getting it indirectly, but it's just not, that's not your
right.
focus. That's not like, it's not sustainable at all to be like, oh, I want to look great this summer at the beach. You're like, not sustainable at all. But if you're focusing like, I want to be really strong and like to be really strong, I have to fuel my body the right way, then that's going to happen.
Right.
It's like, if you can just switch that thought, like that mindset, I mean, everything else falls in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even when I first started powerlifting, I remember I was 145 pounds at the time. And the way that the weight classes work is that you can essentially be in the 138 or less weight class, or 158 pounds and less weight class. And I remember sitting in the middle of them and talking to Allie and being like, hey, like, should I cut weight for this? Which a lot of people do in order to be more competitive. And she told me no. And I was like, why? Like, I'll be so much better if I weigh less and I'm lifting more. And she was like, listen, you are new to this sport. There is no reason for you to want to cut 7 pounds to be more competitive, especially when you're at kind of this like regional or district level. And I think that was a really important moment for me, because it was giving me essentially permission to be okay as I was. And especially because I've had this history of wanting to fit so badly into a box of like, be right here or be right there. So even though there are weight classes in powerlifting, I sit right in between them. And I am now completely okay with that. Like, not going to be at one end or the other, not going to cut weight. And if ultimately I want to have X goal of getting somewhere and I become competitive, say at a national or whatever level, then maybe it makes sense to cut. But right now, like, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm so new. And I think that was another moment that was really important.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're super fortunate that you had somebody to like, that had that mindset, because it could have easily been the other way if somebody super not like super competitive and maybe not thinking in that way and been like, oh yeah, cut, go for it. Like, I mean, that really was super, fortunate for you that you had somebody like that mentoring you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's been a blessing in disguise, because I mean, Allie didn't know my background or anything, like, meaning like my history with eating disorders and things like that, before kind of signing on to coach me, bless her soul. I think that it was a really nice kind of serendipitous pairing, because in a lot of ways it has really improved, I think, my relationship with food, my relationship with my body, and overall how I think about being a competitive athlete, or how I think about being a woman in the gym. Regardless of, I think, why women are there, I think it's really important to know kind of what makes sense for you and how you can have a healthy relationship with working out and how you can have a healthy relationship with food, etc.
Yeah, and it all kind of led there too, Anna, because I mean, you look at, you were younger and you were working really hard and you were doing, I mean, competitive cheerleading is, you have to be so strong to do that. Like that is a strength sport. So, it all really led up perfectly over time to get you where you are right now. But yeah, no, that's just really cool about how that's how you started. And like, you finally got to like that place, because competitive cheerleading is no joke.
Yeah, it's no joke. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh my gosh, watching Bring It On when I was younger. And I was like, I have to do this.
That's hilarious.
And then it was just so nice, I think, to be able to do it. I did it for a few years and again, was much younger when I was doing it. But it was one of those things where I was like, wow, I can say that I was like on ESPN or if it was ever broadcast or something like that. And my team wasn't great, but it was still just really nice to be in something that was considered to be elite, even though we were super young. So that was fun. And I think I've always really, really strived to, in some way outside of work or whatever I'm doing academically or professionally, had an outlet where I can still kind of push the limits of what it means to be, I think, successful.
I love that. No, I mean, I love you're doing such positive work, and I love that you do document everything because it's going to help so many people. And I mean, I love your story too, because I mean, I know that there's so many people that can relate. Like, I know you have, a lot of resources that you put out. Like, is there anything that you're working on in the future that you just want to put out there and share with people, or like just things for people to keep an eye out for, to check out?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking. So I've always, I think, in the back of my mind, dabbled with putting together an ebook or something like that can have or be essentially a consolidated resource. I do have a website that's just annahjamison.com, but I think what's been most helpful for me is having my Instagram. When I was struggling with when I was struggling with my relationship to food, and still as I struggle and become better with it, I do kind of make connections or follow people on Instagram who I think are similar to me and who have a really positive, I think, relationship or way with dealing with it. And so I remember, oh my gosh, Jazzy Things is her Instagram handle, but she was one of the first people that I ever followed that was a pretty big Instagram name. And so I remember just following her journey through competing at a really high level, doing bikini shows, and then seeing her gain weight back and how she was kind of struggling with the yo-yo nature of what it means to be competitive in that way. And I was like, wow, Instagram and social media in a lot of ways has really helped me to give perspective to my own story, especially because, again, in my family, that was nothing that we talked about publicly. Of course, I talk about it with my sister and things like that, but nothing where my family encouraged me to go see a therapist or said, hey, like, I think you might have an eating disorder. Let's talk about this.
Right.
Instead, it was really pushed under the rug. And not until I got into social media did I see that, wow, a lot of people are struggling with this. And so that's when I started really wanting to get the idea of making my Instagram bigger and trying to share my story as transparently as possible. Sometimes it can definitely be nerve-wracking, I think, but I do want to or hope that it can be a resource for some people. So whenever I'm posting, like taking forever to write out my recipes to certain things, or saying that like, hey, today was a bad day in the gym, this is how I was able to deal with it, I do hope that some people are able to use that in a way that helps them get through something that they're struggling with.
Definitely. No, I mean, that's honestly the best way to use like your social media accounts or like, your Instagram, because like, I mean, obviously you have people that only put the most amazing things out there, but like won't share the struggles. And it's like the people that share the struggles are the people that are really going to make the impact, because that's makes it more real and relatable. And like, that's when you can really make a change in somebody's life. So I love that you do that. I mean, yeah, I know it's definitely nerve wracking to put yourself out there, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, it was definitely scary, but I really appreciate you saying that, because there have been some times when I've shared certain things and I'm like, oh my gosh, like someone's going to screenshot that and send it to my boss and then I'm fired. like who knows really the spiral or whatever of some of the thoughts. But at the end of the day, like, this is who I am and this is the story and this is how I've gotten to where I am today, or why I take certain things so seriously. And I've learned to not really be that apologetic about it. And I think that is something that I admire in a lot of people. Another person who I followed very early on in like my YouTube days was Nikki Blackadder. And I just loved that she used to take vlogs and not have any makeup on. And I was like, wow, that, because she at that time just doesn't have perfect skin. And a lot of us don't have perfect skin. And I just remember her being so bold about that, and again, apologetic about it or unapologetic about it. And I thought that was really admirable or admirable. And so I really wanted to, in any way possible, kind of imitate that in the way that I talked about myself. But yeah, it's really hard, I think, to talk about mental health issues, or to talk about kind of a relationship that I had with alcohol, or to talk about dating stuff, which is a whole other story. Some of the guys who have dated still follow me, so I try to not be as explicit there. But I've definitely been able to connect, I think, with a lot of people who have changed my life in a lot of ways through Instagram and through some of the more vulnerable things that I post. And that has definitely, to me, been what makes it worth it. Because sometimes I want to delete Instagram and I think it's too much. But
don't do it. Don't do it. If I see you delete it, I'm going to text you really angry. So don't do it. Oh man. So hey, I don't think we mentioned it. What is the best way for people to follow you on Instagram?
Yeah. So definitely, I think I post for the most part every day. So if anyone ever wants to kind of connect, Instagram is the best way. I also have Facebook, and I also have an athlete page on Facebook, which is just Annah E. Jamison. So that's an easy way to connect with me as well. I think my email is also linked in my Instagram.
Perfect. Awesome. Because Instagram's, it's banana lifts, right?
Yeah, banana lifts.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's
it's
awesome.
So funny. So I have an aunt, my dad's sister, who calls me Banana, and she has always called me that, just like not Anna Banana, just Banana. And a few people throughout, I guess, my childhood and then recently just call me Banana. And then when I was when I was like Googling how you kind of make your Instagram more attractive to the fitness community, they're like, you have to have like a fitness tailored handle. And so, because at first it was just Annah Jamison was my handle, but then I changed it to Banana Lifts. And yeah, I eat probably 2 or 3 bananas a day in my smoothies. So it kind of worked.
No, I love that. I love that. And Annah, just closing question that I ask every guest.
Sure.
But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's been something that's been your biggest takeaway through your journey so far, but if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that my biggest piece of advice, if you are starting out on a plant-based diet or changing your diet in any way, is to give it a try and not be too hard on yourself if it doesn't go as well as you thought kind of the first time around, but to put things in perspective as you're moving through really making a significant life change, as big as kind of a diet one is. But I think outside of that, a piece of advice that I have is definitely to set high expectations for yourself. I think I see a lot of people sell themselves short or not essentially reach their highest potential because they're so fearful of what it might take to get to a next level. But I say go for it. Hell, what's the worst that can happen?
Right? No, I 100% agree. Yep. That's perfect, yep. Annah. And just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited for people to go check out your page, and I'm excited just to keep up with everything that you do, because I know you're just going to continue just to put out a lot more positivity. So just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you as well. Thanks so much for reaching out to me. I really appreciate it. This has been wonderful.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Annah. I love the work she's doing, so be sure to give her a follow on social media to keep up with everything that she's been working on. You can find her social media links that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drkaseyjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Annah's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Annah, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.